Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm Attorney John Redmann.
And hello everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Shauna Sanford. Well, the idea of ditching the 9-to-5 job and owning a business is part of the American dream for many people. It can be worth pursuing, but there are some important things that you need to consider before jumping in with both feet. The reality is that 50% of new businesses fail within their first year, and almost all of them experience a loss within the first 5 years. But more and more people are realizing that buying an already successful, thriving business is the better way to go.
So how do you do it? We have two top-notch guests today to help answer that question and more. Known as one of the leading authorities on buying, selling, and improving businesses is business broker and author Michelle Seiler-Tucker. And because there are so many legal issues that come up, whether you're buying or selling a business, Attorney Damon Kirin is also here to help walk us through some of the important first steps that just about everyone goes through.
That's right, and this is so big because there's so many people out there who want to own their own business. We're going to be talking about business brokers, and that may be a new terminology for a lot of people out there, but in your experience, is it a good idea to go with a business broker?
Well, not my area of expertise, but I can tell you that in a related way, I've seen businesses that get sued because they weren't completely upfront about maybe certain issues and problems they had, and they didn't reveal in the process of, well, actually the owners of the businesses didn't reveal certain important details like liens, debts, things they thought they could keep sort of under the carpet, and it led to lawsuits that I've been involved in, and we asserted fraud, and we ended up getting some money back for the people who bought the business. So broker's an excellent idea is the answer to that question.
That's right, and our guests are definitely experts on this whole idea of business brokers. So stay tuned. If you want to start your own business or sell an existing business, our guests will tell you the best way to get started. We have to take a very short break, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.
That one-on-one relationship with an adult is so important. If every day somebody is touching base with somebody, and then they get to spend some time each week with that person, there's a relationship that develops. And all the communities and school services are really designed to create that one-on-one relationship.
This school has taught me so much to be the best that I can be. They never give up on me. They never give up on anyone here.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. So you want to go into business for yourself, or maybe you have a business that you'd like to sell. How do you get started? It can be a daunting task either way, but our guests today are just the ones to help us navigate the risky waters of entrepreneurship. They're going to take us into the world of buying and selling businesses and how lots of people just like yourself out there are making it happen.
Michelle Seiler-Tucker is known as a formidable force in the industry of buying and selling businesses. She is president and founder of Michelle Tucker International and Capital Business Solutions, and award-winning author of the book Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth. And we want to welcome as well Attorney Damon Kirin to the show. He is an attorney for actual title and abstracting, which serves as the closing agent for the purchase and sales of real estate and businesses in Louisiana. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you for having us. So excited
Looking forward to this
here.
discussion. Very interesting.
There are so many people out there, as you know, who want to start their own business. They want to ditch that 9-to-5 and they want to go into business for themselves. And when you hear that, what's the first thing that you say?
The first thing I say is don't start a business. Buy an existing business with proven cash flow, proven track record, client base, and employees in place. It's a much better decision than starting a business from scratch. 50% of all startups will fail within the first 5 years.
That is huge. 50% of all startups, people who are starting from the ground, starting from scratch.
Yep, 50%. And it's like 85 to 90% of all new restaurants will also fail within the first year.
Is it a game for the rich? I mean, can you just buy a business? With, does it cost $1 million to buy a business?
It doesn't, John. We've sold businesses for $30,000 all the way up to $30 million.
Can you get
So there's
financing?
all types of different businesses. There is financing, but financing is very difficult to obtain in this recession and after the financial debacle. The number one way that all deals are getting done is the buyer is coming up with anywhere from 30 to 50%, and the seller is holding paper on the rest. The seller is the bank. The seller is owner financing the transaction, which speaks volumes in their confidence level that that business will and can survive.
So for people who are just not that familiar with the whole world of buying and selling businesses, and they see that owner financing, and they don't really know what that means, it can be a little bit scary. But really, for you, that's the only way to go, right?
Well, it's obviously not the only way to go, but it is the best way to go right now because the banks have so many conditions. It's very difficult. In the last 3 years, we've only been able to finance a few transactions through the bank. So 100% of all of my sellers agree to seller financing up front, which is a lot better for the buyer because there's not a whole lot of paperwork involved. There's not, with the SBA or any lenders, you're looking at maybe 3 to 6 months. With seller financing, you can buy your business, close your business within 2 to 4 weeks.
Why don't we take a step back? And,
Sure.
and there are a lot of people out there who maybe they do have that 9-to-5 job and they don't see that as their long-term happiness. Maybe they don't see it as a real way to get to that retirement or even a way to finance their kids' college one day. Describe for us generally what it takes to buy a business, or maybe you have a business and you're thinking, I want to retire, I want to get rid of this business and maybe go sit on the beach somewhere if you can sell your business for good money.
Right.
Describe for us generally, if you were doing a little 5-minute seminar, a few minute seminar, what does it take to buy a business or sell a business? What are the main things you need to know?
Well, on the buy side, first and foremost, you really need to do some soul searching and find out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your passions, what are your skill sets, who's going to be involved with you in a transaction, what is it that really interests you, and what is your financial capability. So many buyers call us up and they have no idea what their financial capability is. We need to start there, and then we need to start with skill sets. And then we walk our buyers through a different variety of businesses that match their skill sets, match their strengths, and also, most importantly, match their financial capability. And we can get buyers into businesses with very little money down, and we can show them different avenues and resources that are available to them. On the sell side, the number one mistake that all sellers make is they don't plan their exit strategy. You should plan your exit strategy from day one of buying or starting a business, and that's the number one mistake. They wait until a catastrophic event occurs to sell their business, and usually when that happens, John, the business is trending downward. The best time to sell your business is when your business is doing well.
I've heard you say that, many, many times, and I'm sure for a lot of our viewers out there to hear about, planning the end right at the beginning is not something that a lot of people
It sounds crazy.
ever think about.
Right.
Just getting started with starting the business is so huge.
Right.
But really, you should think about how you're going to get out of it.
Well, you absolutely should. You need to plan your exit strategy because you want to keep that business forever. I mean, we have owners that are in their 80s really wanting to get out of that business, and the problem is they've stayed in that business for too long. They should have sold that business years ago. So the best time to sell the business is when it's doing well. And in my book, Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth, I teach my clients how to go through all the different steps as far as building your customer base, making sure your business is built on brand loyalty, not location loyalty, making sure you have additional congruent revenue streams. Have employees in place. If you don't have employees and you are the business, you really have a job and you don't have a business to sell. Then we also want to make sure that your financial records are clean and in good shape because that's what a buyer is going to look at.
Yeah, the financial
Let me ask, so if you're 80 years old and you have a business and it's still making more money than it's losing, does that mean it's too late to sell?
Absolutely not. There's millions and millions of baby boomers planning their exit strategy. Unfortunately, 8 out of 10 businesses do not sell. So what we try to do is educate our clients all the necessary steps they need to take in order to plan that exit strategy. And that 80-year-old man, he probably has a viable business to sell. But we need to look and see, is his technology up to speed? Is a buyer going to have to put in money to get his technology to where it needs to be? Is he doing things the new way or the old way? I mean, we have a welding supply company that we listed, and this company's been in business for decades, and the owner is in his 80s. The problem with that business, John, is everything is on paper. There are no computers. He has Rolodex and Rolodex and Rolodex of all of his clients, and all of his inventories on scratches of paper. So the problem with that business, heaven forbid if there's a fire, because everything's going to go up in smoke.
Wow.
So the new buyer's going to have to come in, spend the money to get that business to where it needs to be in today's.
Let's bring in Damon here. So what are some of the legal considerations here when you work with businesses, even before a deal is in the works? What are some of the legal considerations that you think people need to be thinking about if they're thinking about buying or selling a business?
Some of the most common questions we get oftentimes from buyers is, what am I buying? How am I going to know, or how can I ensure that the business will run effectively? And that's why it's so important to go through due diligence, learn the business you're going to buy, understand the business, do things to ensure that the employees in the business will stay there after you purchase the business, because oftentimes the person that owns the business might depart, and you want to make sure the critical employees that run the business on a day-to-day basis are there to ensure your continued success. On the seller side, oftentimes the issues are, if I do owner financing, how am I going to be sure that I'm going to get the money that's entitled to me? And if for some reason this person that buys the business doesn't do a particularly good job, could I potentially be in a position where I didn't get my purchase price, I didn't get what I was told I was going to receive, and this new person's run the business in the ground, and then now a business I thought I sold, I might need to jump back in and run. And we do everything we can under the law to protect both the buyers and sellers, protect their interests, and make sure that in the event of these contingencies, the impact of the parties is as minimal as possible.
But how do you keep those employees there? How do you keep those employees from staying and not going and starting a competing business?
The easiest way in almost all the agreements that we craft for the purchase and sale of a business involve what's called a non-compete agreement. And under Louisiana law, you're allowed to have your employees agree they will not compete with you for a specified period of time, generally cannot exceed 2 years, and the geographic locations need to be specifically enumerated. By that I mean Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish,
Let's
St.
put that
Tammany.
in a little bit more plain English. In other words, you can go to the people who work for the company and say, if you want to keep your job today, or maybe you give them a little time to think about it, you can keep your job, but you have to sign a legally binding document that says you will not go work for the competition for the next 2 years within a 100-mile radius or something like that.
Absolutely, and the real fear there is you don't want to buy a business which you don't have a lot of history with, and there's an employee that's been there 10 years that might be loyal to the seller. You wouldn't want a situation where you purchase the business and that key employee would say, I don't really know you, I'm going to go start my own business. You want to protect
all
against
the fellow
that.
workers with them.
And possibly customers, industry, know-how, everything. You want to make sure that you're protected in your human capital.
Well, when you're buying an existing business, though, don't you typically want to keep, if it's a thriving business, don't you want to keep those employees there?
Absolutely. And in all the years I've been selling businesses, very seldom have the employees ever left. I mean, as long as the owner comes in and he doesn't change everything and he's not a joke to work for, they typically stay. So employees don't want to leave their job. They want to stay. They get fearful that the new owner is going to come in and terminate them.
Yeah.
But it's usually not an issue. If we have key employees, we might talk to the seller about putting some incentives in place to maybe a percentage of the proceeds to go to those particular owners to help us with the transition and transaction.
And certainly if it's a business that is attractive enough that somebody's going to buy it, there's the potential there that the business could be revitalized, and maybe these employees can be incentivized to stay and maybe even see pay raises and promotions. And maybe that's one of the due diligence thing you said. You try and offer to them the possibility that this is not only going to be a steady paycheck, but an improved paycheck, if not promotions and so forth, right?
And something we see, and Michelle can probably speak to this more, but we've had the joy of being involved in business closings where we stay in contact with the purchasers, and we see sometimes people come into an existing business and they have new ideas, they have ways in which they think they can improve the business, and oftentimes we have the joy of seeing them 6 months, a year after the fact, and seeing that they've actually taken the business to another level.
But no guarantees, right?
There are never any guarantees, absolutely.
Right. In part of the due diligence, one thing I want to get in because we're close to the break till we go to the viewer questions is due diligence. There may be hidden debts the company owes that the seller doesn't, maybe wants to keep hidden under the rug. Part of due diligence that you do, maybe Michelle does, is you verify that this company doesn't have a secret debt or problems that could be disastrous for the buyer, right?
And that gets to a great point. Generally, and we can talk about this a little bit more, you're either going to do an asset sale where you're purchasing the assets of the company, or you might actually purchase a company. In the case of an asset sale, a debt that the company that was using those assets, running the business had, isn't that big of a deal because that's not going to attach to you. If you're buying the company, those become huge issues. For instance, a judgment, a lien, some sort of accounts payable, something that's owed to a third party. So in those circumstances, it's very important that we do everything, and we do it on our end in terms of checking the applicable public records to make sure there are no liens, there's nothing out there that no one knows about that the buyer's going to get stuck with when they buy this
And
new
that's something a
business.
title company that you are the attorney for would do, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to have to take a quick break. We have so much more to get into. We have our viewer questions that are coming up. So stay tuned. When we come back, we'll take your questions. We'll be right back.
I need help finding a doctor.
Pace.
I needed help with my medication.
Pace.
I needed help getting around.
The Shirley Landry Benson Pace Center is a place that helps seniors remain in their homes, providing the care they need. If you or a family member are over 55 years old, you may be eligible for benefits offered by PACE. For more information, contact us at 504-835-0006. PACE, caring for those who cared for us.
Welcome back to the show. Well, this is definitely a conversation that you all are interested in. We have some great questions from our viewers, so we're going to go straight to them. Our first question comes from Julia. She says, I've never owned a business before. Will the seller help to teach me about the business I'm purchasing?
Maybe the broker?
Absolutely, Julia.
Right, yeah.
When I take listings, we always make sure that the seller provides accurate training, and really training depends upon the size of the business. If it's a small business, 2 to 4 weeks. Medium-sized business could be a little bit longer, but absolutely the seller will stay on to train the new owner.
You know, I find it so interesting that I think both of you mentioned this a little bit before in the other, in the first segment. A lot of times when people buy businesses or want to buy businesses, they don't really know what kind of business they want to buy.
You know, they really don't, and that's what we do when we interview and educate the buyer. We really sit down with them, again, to find out what their skills are, what their passions are. Sometimes people get so involved with their work that they forget what they once loved to do. So we try to have them uncover that passion and make the right fit from a financial standpoint and a skill set and a passion standpoint as well. And a lot of people also buy cash flow. They don't always buy industry, they buy cash flow. So a lot of buyers will come to me and say, I want to buy a business that's generating $100,000 in net income. So again, it really depends upon the buyer.
I want to buy one too, but I only want to spend $100.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
So talk a
we
little
get those buyers too.
Well, talk a little
long.
bit about the business climate and just how things are when it comes to buying and selling businesses.
You know, right now this is a very good time to buy and sell because there's millions and millions of businesses. There's 27 million businesses in the U.S. and there's over 7 million baby boomers planning their exit strategy, planning to retire. So we have an influx of sellers that are wanting to sell their business and afford the lifestyle they've always dreamed of. And now more than ever before, we have an influx of buyers because so many people have been laid off from corporate America, and they're able to pull money out of their retirement funds in order to purchase a business without paying taxes and penalties. So we have what I call the perfect storm has occurred. We have we have an influx of buyers and sellers wanting to make deals.
Yeah, and the climate is ripe for it.
The climate is absolutely right.
So
This is a perfect time.
when do I come to someone like you?
On the buy side or sell
Yes.
side? On the buy side, when you first start thinking about buying a business, you should come to me so I could sit down and we can go from everything from, like I said, skill sets, passion, financial capability, etc. A lot of people decide they want to buy a business, but then they really haven't looked at their financial capability, and that's where we have to start.
And so when I'm looking for a broker, you're one of the best. You are a leading
I
authority.
absolutely am the
You
best. I
absolutely
am
are.
the leading authority on
But
buying
in-
and selling businesses.
But in your book, you have so many wonderful tips for people out there who are interested in selling and buying businesses. But for people who are looking for a broker, you do have some specific questions that people should ask. What are some of those questions?
I do. I have 20 questions, and it's actually the last chapter in Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth. You know, first and foremost, when you go to a broker, you want to know what is their experience level. How long have they been selling businesses? What type of businesses have they sold? How many businesses do they sell a year? How many offices do they have? And there's different questions for the sell side versus the buy side. Unfortunately, a lot of business brokers don't really do a proper evaluation. If the seller says, okay, I want $10 million for my business, they write it up for $10 million. We don't do that. We do a really thorough evaluation, and then we always make sure that that business, that price tag, is going to meet what I call the buyer sanity check.
How does the attorney work with you in buying or selling businesses?
Well, you know, obviously the attorney's role is very crucial in the process. You cannot close on a business without having legal counsel. So,
and sometimes there are legal issues that roll in.
Of course.
I want to give us an example of how you basically earn your fee on some of these instances, Damon.
Well, what we essentially do is serve as a closing agent. Much like if you were to buy or sell a piece of immovable property, real estate, we actually don't represent specifically other party. They have the ability to retain counsel should they choose, but our job is to be an attorney essentially to the transaction. That's generally the function that we serve in business closings.
So you represent neither the seller nor the buyer?
Absolutely, because our role, just like for a closing attorney for real estate, is to make sure that the parties understand the transaction they're engaged in and that everything that was requested to be done is done, and most importantly, that the final legal document memorializing the transfer of the business from the seller to the buyer memorializes the party's intent. That is my role, my company's role in this process.
Are you hired? Are you engaged by the broker then, or who has called you up and said, I need your help?
Essentially the transaction, generally the buyer and the seller are free to use any attorney they want because I do so much of this work. Oftentimes when Ms. Seiler has a listing or has a deal, I get involved on the outset and at least explain to the parties what they're about to get themselves into.
Okay, all right, we have another question here from Edna. She says, should I get a small business loan to buy a business? Back to the financing issue.
okay, so it's very difficult to get bank financing these days, if not impossible. And a perfect storm has to occur both on the sell side and the buy side. And on the buy side, the banks are requiring that you have specific industry experience. So if you're buying your first business, and let's say it's a bakery, and you have zero experience in a bakery, chances are you're probably not going to get a loan just based on that. Okay. But they're going to look at credit. They want 25 to 30% down, and they want you to 100% collateralize that loan. So that's on the buy side. On the sell side, the seller has to have perfect books and records, which typically doesn't always happen. Right. And the net income on the tax returns has to cover the debt service of the business and afford the buyer enough to live on. So again, back to what we talked about in segment 1, the best way to buy your first business is seller financing. Come up with a down payment of anywhere from 30 to 50% and seller finance the balance.
Okay, all right. Lindsay, did you want to add
One thing
something?
I just want to add this. Yes. She might be talking about, there's an SBA, Small Business Administration loan program that exists. The problem with that program is it's very, very document intensive, and I've known several individuals, even though the rate can be good, the terms can be good, it's just a very, very difficult process. Not that isn't something that should be investigated, but oftentimes in our experience we've seen people have gone down that road and chose instead to just utilize owner financing.
Okay, yeah, and so I guess that's something that we really can't stress enough is that people who are interested in buying, who maybe are taking their first step into this whole world of buying businesses, really should not be afraid of owner financing because it sounds like what you're both saying is that that's probably the most viable alternative for somebody who's interested in buying a business.
That is the absolute easiest point of entry for a buyer is to do seller financing because there's a lot less red tape. Even SBA requires industry experience, and SBA lenders have a lot more rules and regulations than conventional lenders do.
But that's not to say it's not without risk, right? I mean, because it can be risky, can it not?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. Buying an existing business with seller financing absolutely can be risky, but it's a lot riskier than starting a business from scratch.
Which leads us to another question from Lindsay. She says, why should I buy someone else's business instead of just starting what I really love?
You know, a lot of people come to me with that same question, and I go back to the research. Statistics show that 50% of all new businesses fail within the first year to 5 years. And buying an existing business, you're buying cash flow, a proven track record, client base, employees in place, systems. You know, when you go out and start a business, you're spending a lot of money. Most people fail because they don't have the proper working capital. They can't sustain their income for years. They also don't have a marketing plan in place. They don't have a business plan, and they just don't have the experience that they need to make that business successful.
Yeah, and just to add, that's assuming that someone like you or somebody's able to verify that the business that you're thinking of buying has the books and can demonstrate it's been around for, let's say, more than 5 years. It can demonstrate a cash flow. It's got employees in place, and it's much more of a sure thing, and the employer isn't selling the business because it's been losing money for the past 5 years.
Exactly.
You know, and so you verify that it's a more safe bet.
We obtain tax returns, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, all the financial records you need in order to prove that that business is stable and making money. I mean, if you have to spend $100,000 on a business that's making cash flow versus invest $100,000 on a new concept, that's really risky. And,
well, and let's hope it's a business that it's what you want to do, not something you really don't want to do.
Right, because you could get into it and then find out, gosh, this is not what I thought it was. I really don't like this.
Yes.
And that has happened,
And
right?
it has happened, and it's much easier to sell an existing business that you just purchased versus a business that you just started, because that business still has a history.
And Damon, you were saying something earlier when we were talking, is when you're putting this business together, you have to think about, how am I going to get that first customer in? What is it going to take to get that customer in and then to keep that customer there?
You know, in business world, they talk about this phrase, customer acquisition costs, and rather than focus on that too much, you need to think about, if you're going to start your business, how's that first person going to walk through your door? How much money are you going to have to spend to get them through that door? And I think, as Michelle was pointing out, when you start a business, even though it seems counterintuitive, I think you need to be even more well capitalized. I've seen the need. If you really want to survive and get to that critical point where everyone knows you're the best restaurant in town and everyone's walking through that door, that may be a year. That could be a year and a half, and you need to be sure you're capitalized to get to that point.
Yeah, and we want to be clear that what we're saying out there is not own your own business. That is not at all what we're saying. But we're saying, instead of starting that business from scratch, go into the world of buying existing businesses that are thriving.
Absolutely.
Statistics back up that argument.
There are over 4 million businesses for sale, 4 million great businesses for sale. So there are so many different businesses that you can take a look at. There's a huge amount of inventory and variety that are making money. So why risk starting a new business?
Yeah, well, there's so much more that we are going to talk about. We're going to have part 2. We haven't even gotten into the whole branding issue of businesses, and that's a huge one. So will you guys stay around for part 2?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we love having you here for part 1. We are all out of time today, and we have learned so much. We want to remind everybody to visit the show online at johnredmannpoa.com to get more information.
You can also watch every episode of our show at our website. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and keep sending your questions. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on John Redmann, Power of Attorney.